Hello again, welcome to another episode of My Witcher History. In the previous videos I showed you the first Polish editions of the short stories and the novels, and today I'd like to tell you something about the first Polish original graphic novels from the 90s. It might be interesting for you because the Netflix Witcher show has just been released. I have only watched the first two episodes. I have mixed feelings, but will probably tell you more after I see it all, and will probably analyze the whole season. But I promised myself to watch the rest of it only I will have recorded this video. One interesting fact about the Netflix Witcher show is that it is available also with Polish voiceover, at least here in Poland. And the thing is that Geralt is voiced by Michał Żebrowski, the same actor that used to play Geralt in the original Polish TV series. Alright, let's get to the graphic novels. But before I show them to you, a little bit of history and context. As the Witcher short stories became more and more popular, Andrzej Sapkowski started to visit various fandom conventions like Polcon, the biggest Polish convention at the time. And there he was being approached by many young graphic artists who wanted to adapt his short stories to a comic form. He universally refused, but eventually was persuaded to do a graphic novel by his publisher and the artist Bogusław Polch. You might remember his name because I mentioned it in my previous videos. He was first responsible for the illustrations to the Bounds of Reason short story published in Fantastica. And then he did illustrations for the short story collection The Sword of Destiny, Miecz Przeznaczenia, and then he did almost all the covers for the first editions of both the short stories and the saga. Bogusław Polch is a legendary Polish comic book artist and illustrator. He started first in the 70s, working on adventures of militia captain Jan Żbik, and those comics deserve their own video, and I might prepare one later. And then he did series of albums, adaptations of Erich von Däniken's books about aliens that visited Earth a long time ago and spawned ancient civilizations. And here is the first album in the Erich von Däniken series, Landing in the Andes, from 1982, at least in Poland. One of the first comics I ever bought and read. Well, first serious comics I ever bought and read. And here is the integral edition from a few years back. Hardcover, very good quality paper, all 8 albums in one book. Highly recommended. In the early 80s, Polch started to draw one of the most famous Polish comics of all time, which was called Funky Kowal. And here is the first edition, Funky Kowal. And here is integral edition with 4 books, 4 albums in one, also highly recommended. And the story for Funky Kowal was penned by 2 authors, Jacek Rodek and Maciej Parowski, and that name, Maciej Parowski, is very, very important for the rest of the story. Polch was very famous for his extremely detailed, highly technical style, influenced mainly by the great French artist Paul Guillon. Another amazing Polish cartoonist, Janusz Hrista, said about Polch, "Oh, Polch is absolutely incredible. He once showed me a fresh drawing from his Funky Kowal, and there was this main character holding a dollar coin. And that coin had all the inscriptions just like in real life. He must have done it using a magnifying glass. And I asked him, 'What's the point? You won't be able to see it in print.' And he answered, 'Sure, but I know it's there.'" So when I first saw Polch's illustrations for the Bounds of Flame short stories, I was curious, because I always considered him to be interested more in technology, in science fiction, in futurism. Still, I liked the illustrations a lot, and then I learned about the planned Witcher graphic novels, and that Bogusław Polch wants to change his style completely. He wanted to be less perfect, so to say. And change he did, but I'm not sure if for the better. But the Witcher graphic novels could not have existed without one more person, Maciej Parowski. I have already mentioned his name in context of Funky Kowal, but he was mainly the editor-in-chief of Fantastica, and he also was the editor of Andrzej Sapkowski's short stories. He knew Andrzej Sapkowski very well, we might even say they were friends. So as far as the graphic novels were concerned, Andrzej Sapkowski provided the overall story, Maciej Parowski adapted it, and then Bogusław Polch used his artistic mastery to bring everything together, to bind everything in one creation. The albums were published under Comics label. Comics was the graphic novel magazine that derived from Fantastica and was published since 1987 with this funky cover album being the first one. Alright, let's get to the good stuff. And just a word of warning, there might be some very minor spoilers if you don't know the Witcher stories at all. If you know the stories, there should be no spoilers whatsoever. The first story to be adapted was The Road of No Return. This one, released in August 1993. This is the Geralt's origin story about his parents, Corin, that you can see here. This is not Conan, by the way. This is not Geralt. This is Corin. And Vicenna. This is not Vicenna. This is Vran. Vrans were a race created by Sapkowski. As you can see, some kind of lizard-like humanoids. And the thing is that they do not appear in any other short stories or saga, because Andrzej Sapkowski first planned The Road of No Return as a part of his novel that he created even before The Witcher. As you might remember, The Road of No Return was the second Andrzej Sapkowski short story to be published. At that time, he didn't plan for it to be the origin story for Geralt. Only later, Marcin Sapkowski, when working on the adaptation of the comic, persuaded Andrzej Sapkowski to make it so. But adapting The Road of No Return as the origin story created some continuity problems, especially with the different races that appear in the short stories in the saga. As I've said, Vrans do not appear neither in the short stories nor in the saga, and neither do Bobowaks, like this very hairy gentleman over here. So working on the graphic novels, they've decided to fix it somehow, and they did, and I will show you later how. One more interesting tidbit. Well, do you recognize this lizard on the skull? You might, because it also appeared on the cover of the Last Wish short story collection. Bogusław Polch used the same illustration for the cover. And one more thing, in the magazine we also had some interviews with the team, starting with the interview with Andrzej Sapkowski here, and at the end of the magazine here. I might even later translate it into English. And even though I liked this story, I liked most of the illustrations, I also had some problems with them, because some started to look like caricatures here. Bogusław Polch decided to change his style to be, as I've said previously, less perfect, and unfortunately it shows. And it will continue in the next albums. Then, the very same year, 1993, we got this one, Geralt, which is the adaptation of the first short story called simply The Witcher. And this is by no means a simple retelling of the story. Actually, this one expands the universe considerably. In the first 12 pages, we can find events that led to the main story. So we are shown Vizima here. We are shown some additional characters that we meet later, like, for example, Renfri here, or Jarpen Zirgin. So some characters that would appear later in other stories, like Lesser Evil, first appear in this graphic novel. In this album there is also a long interview with Maciej Parowski and a lovely photo of Parowski and Sapkowski here. Still in 1993 we got this one, The Lesser Evil, or Mniejsze Zło in Polish. And this story is the basis for the first episode of the Netflix Witcher series. And do you remember about the continuity problems with the races of Vrans and Bobowaks I've told you before? They fixed it in the graphic novel. Here you can see a Vran and a Bobowak over here. And this gentleman here is none other than Jaskier or Dandelion, as created by Bogusław Polch. And actually this idea was carried on by the producers of the Polish TV show. They hired Zbigniew Zamachowski, a very famous Polish actor, to play the role of Jaskier. Zbigniew Zamachowski as Jaskier is definitely not as fat as Jaskier in the graphic novels, but there is some similarity. And one more anecdote, Bogusław Polch has always liked to base some of his minor characters on real people, and there is the same here in The Lesser Evil. The character of Stregobor is based on a very unpopular Polish politician named Stefan Niesiołowski. The following year, in 1994, we got the fourth album, Ostatnie Życzenie, or The Last Wish in English, with Yennefer on the cover. And I have to say that even I quite like Bogusław Polch's portrayal of Yennefer, especially here, there are still some problems with characters looking like caricatures, especially here. And some more interesting trivia, if we turn to the first page, there is this scene of fishing for the catfish. And this catfish, when Bogusław Polch was drawing it, he based it on the real catfish that was caught by Andrzej Sapkowski. I'm not sure if you know, but Andrzej Sapkowski is an avid angler and he loves fishing. And he had this trophy, catfish trophy, that Bogusław Polch copied for this comic. All right, let's get to another one. The fifth one, called Granica Możliwości, or Bounds of Reason, released in 1995. Yeah, 1995. And this was another approach by Bogusław Polch to this short story, because first he did illustrations for it in 1991. And we can see here how his style changed. Let's have a look, for example, at the character of Borch, Three Doves here. And now you can see it compared to the original one from 4 years earlier. The last, sixth album, released in 1995, is called Zdrada, or Treason. And this is a completely original story. It's not based on any short story by Sapkowski. This was penned by Sapkowski and Parowski together. And this is the story of Geralt's youth. So we first learn about the trials of Grass. We learn about the rivalry between different Witcher schools. We learn a story about the sorceress called April here as well, a sorceress that changed from an ugly duckling to a beauty. It's quite a decent story, but not on the level of the original stuff written by Sapkowski. And we can also see some recycling of motifs here, just like with the Last Wish cover that was based on an illustration done for The Road of No Return. This knight over here appears on the cover of the Time of Contempt, which is the second tome of the Witcher saga. Even though I like the graphic novels a lot, I still think that there are some problems with them, especially with the approach, with Bogusław Polch's approach to changing his style. I think that the change went too deep and he lost a lot of details and a lot of quality in the process. It is especially visible with characters. Some of them look like caricatures. And there is, in my opinion at least, a problem with color. I think it was implemented in a wrong way. Sometimes it's too garish, sometimes it's non-existent. There is no consistency. I would very much prefer to see all the albums in black and white. And I still hope there will be such an edition in the future. In the meantime, we got this. This is a huge integral edition with all 6 albums in hardcover on very good paper. And all the stories were put in a chronological order, starting with Road of No Return, then The Treason, and so on. Alright, that would be all for this episode. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, maybe comment, or maybe consider subscribing to my channel. If you would like to listen to more stories about Andrzej Sapkowski or about Polish graphic novels, just let me know. I'll try to prepare something. And if you would like to win this first edition of Funky Kowal and the first edition of Comics Magazine, just put your comment below and I will randomly choose a winner and then send it to you. Alright, that would be all for today. Take care, good night, probably Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Take care, bye bye.